Have you ever made some really bad decisions that you wish you could take back? Well, my next guest knows all about that. He made some bad decision that led to violence and went to prison for attempted murder. Thankfully, that's not the end of the story. Raymond Mola, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go back to your childhood. You're growing up in the greater Toronto area in a Muslim home. What was growing up like for you?
I think, well, I know growing up was filled with confusion for me. I was struggling with identity. I was struggling with religious identity and how I belonged to Islam and what that even meant. And I had a lot of questions about life, and it didn't seem like anyone could really answer any of those.
So when you said nobody could answer those, I mean, were you seeking other people to try to help you make sense of life?
Well, I was seeking out definitely my Islamic roots and trying to understand my religion and belief system and why we were Muslims. I had family and relatives who were Christians and Hindus and a number of other things, and I tried to understand, well, what's the difference? And if we know that they're not going in the same direction, is one of them right? Is one of them wrong? What side are we on?
So you get involved in drugs and you start getting into trouble. What led to that? Was that because of some of the confusion you were having?
Definitely. I was searching it out, and I actually started attending the mosque, reading the Quran, and finding at the end of it that I didn't feel like it answered any of the questions that I was seeking to find out, but yet having this expectation that we have to live for Allah and live up to these rules and traditions, and I just casted it off at a young age and decided to do my own thing.
So you felt that the standards were what, too high or unattainable, or?
Well, definitely left me feeling with more guilt than acceptance of God, because if I take a real hard look at myself, I don't think I've ever been living up to His standards.
So you start getting into trouble. You even have the police show up at your door. What was some of the things going on at that time?
Well, I guess that same acceptance that I was searching for, I started to try to find in friends. And one of the ways I did that was at a young age, I started robbing a local convenience store for chocolate bars and candies and being able to give that away at school to my friends for free. And that'll gain you a lot of friends real quick.
You're kind of like a Robin Hood, a little bit like that. So you continue going down this path. Eventually, you will actually try to kill somebody. Tell me about that. Going back, yes, December 2004.
Yeah, at this point, I had been long on that road of just things getting worse and worse and the crimes getting bigger and bigger. And by that time in 2004, I had been suppressing even my conscience about the things I'd been doing, and there was a lot of abuse at home and confusion in my own personal life that just led to me feeling like acting on my violence was a way to control what was going on. And time again, it showed that it was no answer at all. But at the time, I really thought it was, and I thought that if I took control of the situation, that somehow they would bring about peace. I ended up almost killing a man.
So tell me about that. I know it's a little bit hard for you to talk about, but he didn't die, but you stabbed him 9 times.
By the grace of God, a person stabbed 9 times didn't die. At first, it was definitely considered a second-degree murder because he died on the scene. I was in custody, and the police were presenting me with the charges, but he was put into a drug-induced coma and kept alive for 48 hours, and that's when he survived. Because he survived, the charges were dropped to aggravated assault. And so I got the very least for a federal sentence, which is 2 years plus a day.
I mean, that in itself is amazing. So did you feel, okay, this could have gone a lot worse. I could be spending, the next 20, 25 years or maybe the rest of my life in prison. But he survives and you get really quite a short sentence.
Yeah, even looking back at it, I think more so now, having a lot more gratitude and appreciation for it than I saw back then, that I wouldn't even be sitting here right now had that man died.
So what brought you to this decision to follow Jesus and some of the things that were happening at that time?
Well, about 5 years after I gotten released from prison, I started to realize that I was no more free out here, which is what I think all the prisoners were looking forward to, than I was when I was incarcerated. And I started to look around and I realized that men and women have the same vices, some of them different vices, but we're all struggling in this way where there seems to be something we're attaining to that we don't quite have. And that desire started to kind of catapult me to searching out for a new kind of freedom, a freedom I ended up finding in Christ.
How did you find it? Because somebody's watching and said, okay, found Christ. How did it happen?
He actually found me. I had just made a decision to return to a church. It was one of the places where I felt like I had more answers than questions, and it was beginning to plant seeds in my life. from the time that I committed the crime until now, which was about 7 years later, and that one day just all of those little seeds just came together and made sense of the story of the need for Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross and the significance of his sacrifice on the cross.
Now, I'm meeting you today for the first time. I can't imagine you being a violent person. You're very gentle. I know that you love God, you love people. What did your family, did they see the difference in you, Raymond?
Oh, actually, that's been one of the things that's created the most contention. When I was growing up and I was getting into all these different variety of troubles, my dad kind of saw it like boys will be boys, and he took it very well. But my mom and me were always butting heads. She expected more, she demanded more, and so we didn't get along very well. But when I came to faith, there was a complete switch. My mom was just so happy that anything changed me.
Good.
And my father, he was more enraged that I was professing Jesus Christ as Lord, that I was being objective about my belief that he was the only way.
Because you left Islam.
Yeah.
So you're in prison, and then you come to Jesus, and now you work in prisons and explain the good news, the gospel, relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, and it's more than just simply the gospel itself. Pointing people to Jesus is the beginning of the journey, but then walking with them along this journey, this time where people forget about them. They get, most of the prisons are on outskirts of the city. They take 2 hours in the least to travel to, so family and friends can't keep up relations. So having committed volunteers and being able to be a part of that training process to help them to be equipped to go out and minister to these men and women, that's been such a redemptive work in my life.
Obviously, people are open, because you were telling me there was a graduation recently, what, for 8 of the fellas inside?
Yeah, out in Edmonton Max, we had a graduation request just sent for some Bibles to be sent out to present to these men and women for completing one of our programs, The Prisoner's Journey.
I know, you know, Prison Fellowship, Chuck Colson, amazing ministry. Last thing I'll ask you, Raymond, are people open? You know, because in Canadian culture, often now the religious stuff, keep it away from us. Are people open to talking about spiritual things?
I think this is one of the interesting things I found. When I was doing street evangelism, people had their phones, a little bit of money in their pocket, places to go, people to meet, and so there wasn't as much openness. And that's when I started praying, Lord, where do you want me? Where are people going to be open to this message where I can be fruitful? And that actually got me into the prison waiting rooms, which eventually led me to Prison Fellowship Canada. And so I definitely recognize that there's a need and a hunger for prisoners that they want to hear this message. They need to hear this message, and they're open to hearing this message.
And some of those guys and ladies as well, they have more freedom on the inside, because a lot of time we're inside a prison even though we may be on the outside.
Yeah, and that's the sad part of it. Like, these guys, through their experience, the way that they're viewed sometimes, the perception of prisoners is like they need the gospel, but it's all of us that need it, inside prison and out. The only thing about being in prison is I think there's a little bit more recognition that you've done something wrong in life, and that there's a possibility for hope.
Okay, Raymond, well, thank you very much. You know, you're a part of what we're doing at 100 Huntley Street, telling the lives of, you know, people that have had their lives transformed like yours, and now you're a part of seeing other lives get transformed as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And you know what? If you have never made that decision to follow Jesus, and you think, well, I don't even know if this is true, why don't you give it a try? Raymond did, I did. Many others have given that, you know, at least being open to the message of the gospel of Jesus. So give us a call, 1-866-273-4444. Talk to a wonderful prayer partner, and it literally will change your life. We'll be right back.